Hi everyone, my name is Hernandez and I want to share my reaction to Shakespeare in the Bush by Laura Bohannan. This article showed me how much our worldview affects the way we interpret stories and meanings. So here's the gist of it. Bohannan was an anthropologist who went to live with the Tiv people in Nigeria. She wanted to prove that Shakespeare's stories, especially Hamlet, were universal, that no matter where you're from, you understand them the same way. But once she started telling the story to the Tiv, she quickly realized things weren't going to go as planned. For example, when she said Hamlet saw a ghost, the Tiv immediately responded, "That's not a ghost, that's witchcraft." In their culture, ghosts didn't exist the same way that they do in the Western beliefs. So they explained it through something that did make sense to them. And when Bohannon mentioned that Hamlet's mother married her late husband's brother, the Tiv didn't see that as shocking or immoral at all. In fact, they thought it was the right thing to do. It was part of their tradition to keep the family together. Basically, the Tiv people reinterpreted the story through their own culture and perspectives, and that's what I found so fascinating. Bohannon went to thinking she was teaching them about Shakespeare, but really, they were teaching her about how her own culture shapes interpretation. One of the biggest ideas that stood out to me was something called ethnocentric bias. That's when people assume their own culture way of seeing things is the normal right way. Bohannon believes Shakespeare's themes were universal, but the TIFF showed her that meaning isn't fixed. It depends on who is hearing the story and what the worldview is. Their version of Hamlet wasn't wrong, it was just different. And from their point of view, that really challenged the idea that there's only one correct way to see a story. It also made me think about how this shows up in our everyday lives. Like here in the United States, we usually think making eye contact shows confidence or honesty, but in some cultures, direct eye contact can actually be seen as rude or disrespectful. So if someone avoids eye contact, we might think they're shy or hiding something when really they're just being polite in their own culture. That little difference can completely change how we interpret someone's behavior. Uh, Bohannon's experience also reminded me of the importance of cultural humility, being open minded and realizing that our interpretation isn't the only one that matters. Instead, assuming we know what something means, we should ask questions, listen carefully, and try to understand where others are coming from. Just like Bohannon had to adjust her expectations when the Tiv interpreted Hamlet, we should be willing to do the same when we communicate across cultures. It's not about being right or wrong, it's about being curious and respectful of different perspectives. Like, I've actually experienced a cultural misunderstanding myself. When I first started working at the Chinese school here in El Paso, Texas, I didn't know how to say hello or introduce myself to the main director at the school, so I did what I naturally always do when meeting someone. I shook his hand with a firm grip and looked at him in the eyes. He smiled back at me and said, "You have a strong grip, but may I tell you something?" He told me that in China, there is nothing wrong with shaking hands, but I should not be fast to extend my hand to an elder. He told me, "Don't extend your hand first. Wait to see what the elder does first." Also, a firm handshake can be seen as aggressive or arrogant. At the end, he said, "A simple bow with eyes looking down is the safest way to say hello and thank you." I felt a little embarrassed and I thought I was being polite and professional. That just goes to show that what we think is polite in our eyes can totally be misunderstood by another culture. When that happened, I realized my own assumptions played a big role in how I interpreted things. It taught me to be more observant and more patient, especially when interacting with people who see the world differently. In the end, the biggest lesson I took from Shakespeare in the Bush is that our worldview and perception deeply shape how we interpret meaning. What feels obvious to one person might make no sense to another, and that's okay. If we want to communicate well across cultures, whether it's through stories, conversations, or even just body language, we have to be flexible, humble, and willing to see things from someone else's perspective. So even though Bohannan set out to explain Shakespeare to the Tiv, they ended up teaching her something even more valuable. That's understanding others starts with realizing our own worldview isn't the only one. And honestly, that's a lesson we can all use in everyday life. So, thank you for your time and attention. I hope you enjoyed my interpretation of Shakespeare in the Bush by Lord Bohannan.